aim of today is to work on how to do research-based science fair projects. Okay? At the school level, mostly high school level, but it doesn't have to be high school. Middle school is also fine. How do we do research-based science fair projects? So first thing, we have to understand what is a research-based project and how do we do it. But since this is the IFR, we can't come here and not show some experiments. So we do have some experiments, and after we are done, especially since there are students here, we will show you some very simple experiments. Very simple experiments. You can go home and do these experiments. They don't require anything very fancy. But these are experiments where you have to ask a lot of questions. You have to think. Okay, and thinking is something which we've almost forgotten how to do. So we will do some experiments. Should be fun and should make you think. Okay. So we get started with the science fair part of it. Now I have been sort of lucky enough that I have been working with extremely, children are always very inquisitive. They ask a lot of questions. They're very enthusiastic about what they do. And I have the privilege of working with a lot of children across the city, across the country over the last few years. Starting from what used to be called the Science Technology Discovery Fair more than 10 years back. Then there's a national fair called IRIS, there's an Indian National Science and Engineering Fair, and of course Express as well. And over the years, I have made a lot of observations on mostly things that go wrong while doing science fair projects, and hopefully some tips about how we could think about doing interesting projects and do them well. Okay, and what are we looking for? So that's my email address, arnab@tianfar.in. Feel free to send me an email whenever you have a question, if you have something, no problem. And as was announced, I also run something called Chai and Why. So I'll talk to you about that as well. Now, I'm going to tell you basically why are we doing this, why are we doing this fair, what are research-based projects, some standard tips, do's and don'ts. If you just follow those tips, that's half the way there. You'll automatically make sure your project is a research-based project. I will give you examples of projects at various levels what are the best kind of projects, where are we trying to aim at, and tell you how to come up with ideas for projects, and then we look at some of last year's projects as well. Okay. So first, let me just shamelessly advertise Chai and Why. If you don't know about Chai and Why is something that happens twice a month. Twice a month, it's free, always free. On the first Sunday of the month, so that is the Sunday that's coming up now, at 11 o'clock, it's at the Prithvi Theatre in Juhu. Okay? Basically what happens at Chai and Why is somebody from TIFR comes and has it's not a lecture, it's mostly a discussion. We have a very short talk about something interesting, mostly connected with research at TIFR, but not always. And then we have chai, of course, and we have questions. We discuss things, we ask questions. So it happens first Sunday at 11 o'clock at Prithvi Theatre, third Sunday at Ruparel College in Matunga. Feel free to come in whenever you want. The best place to figure us out is look at Facebook, Chai and Why. You can sort of ask us questions there, you can look at what's happening. It's nice and interactive. So like us, you get automatic updates as well. Okay, it's free, it's fun, and everybody is welcome. No minimum age. In fact, during the summer holidays, we ensure that even small kids will get something out of it, and we have special programs at Diwali, Holi, and summer vacations. Okay, so the next one coming up this weekend is something interesting. It's the year of crystallography this year, International Year of Crystallography. We're going to discuss some very weird kind of crystals called quasi-crystals. And before we can discuss quasi-crystals, we'll tell you what is a crystal. And after that, I don't have a picture for it, but at Ruparel College, 2 weeks later, we will be talking about gemstones and why they are colored, and how gemstones get their color. It's also part of crystallography. And a month later, in September, we're going to talk about malaria. It's been 100 years since we knew that mosquitoes cause or transmit the malarial parasite, but we still are struggling to control malaria. So, what is this game going on between humans and the mosquito and the malarial parasite? And there have been some very recent things that have happened in the lab which are very promising. in this regard. So we'll talk about more later. Okay. So first, before we do a science project, we must know what is science. Okay. So let's start off with what is science. Science क्या होता है? Anyone? You know it, but you can't frame a definition for it. Okay? Yeah.
Any other language? Not
So,
English.
somebody else has an idea what is science. Study of something. That's a good one. Very good. Study of something. Anyone else? What is science? Yes.
Asking questions to things that happen in everyday life.
Very good. One very important part in science is asking questions. Science क्या होता है? Doing experiments. Brilliant. Brilliant. Very nice. Okay. Doesn't matter. So science is our effort at understanding the world around us. This could be, the world around us means anything that's happening around us, anything that's happening in a cell inside us, anything that's happening in a galaxy far, far away. If I am trying to understand that systematically, that is science. And how do you do that? You do that by asking questions and doing experiments. These are the two ways you do science. Okay. So when you do science, you know various things. What is research then? Research is trying to do experiments, ask questions to learn something new. You want to learn something that you didn't know before. Okay. That is research. And it's certainly not, especially for students, it's not mugging up equations and formulae and remembering how to balance a chemical equation. That is not science. Okay, so if you think that this is what science looks like, science doesn't look like this. Okay, you don't have to remember everything that you necessarily need to. You need to understand. Understanding is more important than mugging up some formula. Okay. Now, unfortunately, the world is very big, it's very large, and it's very difficult to put it into compartments. This is physics, this is biology, this is chemistry. Right? If you have a flower and you've cut it and you're looking at it under the microscope, the flower doesn't care whether you're a biologist or a chemist or what you're looking at. And science actually, these divisions that we've made, this is physics and this is chemistry and this is mathematics, these are artificial divisions for us to understand, to give you more exams, whatever. But as such, don't worry about these things. Should this be environmental science or should this be in biochemistry or should this be in something else? Don't worry about that part so much. Okay. And a lot of the science that we do, people are saying, but why do you want to do this? What is the use of this? There's no use for doing this. Don't worry. Many of the things that we do in science, we do because we just want to understand why. It's alright, it's okay if there is space-time that is bending. Is there any use why space-time bends? Well, I don't know. Maybe 500 years later somebody will figure out a use for that and use it for something. But don't worry, it is interesting to know why space-time bends, as an example that we just heard somebody talk about. Okay. So often you will have that, things you do today depend on what somebody else did for something completely different. For example, high energy physicists, particle physicists, people who bang particles into each other. When you bang particles into each other, you produce new particles, you produce rays, energy, lots of it, and you have so much of data. So these particle physicists were producing lots and lots of data. And they needed a way to, I did an experiment, but I need to share my data with them. How do you share data between people? Right? So just because physicists wanted to share their experimental data, they came up with a way that computers could be connected to do this. This led to the internet. Now, people didn't invent the internet because they wanted everybody to download movies and watch things and listen to Facebook or go to Facebook and watch YouTube. But it's so important today. This came out of something done for something completely different. People were trying to figure out how do you get these when these collisions happen, how do you exchange your data? Okay, so don't worry about if somebody asks you why are you doing this. And of course, in science, the more you know, the more questions you will have. Questions is very, very important. Asking questions. Okay. Now, you can take the simplest of objects, simple things, and you will find that there are questions about so many aspects of science. Okay. Now, if you look at a street light, you can have these in Mumbai and some places in signals, but if you go outside the city in rural areas where there is no guaranteed electricity, this is a very good thing, a solar power street light. Now, this thing involves so many things, there's so much science in this. Okay. So, there's a solar cell. Should I use plastics for the solar cell? Should I use silicon for the solar cell? Should I use something else? Right? If I want to have a tube light for 8 hours, how much power do I need? How big a battery do I need? What do I make the battery of? Should I use a tube light? Should I use an LED? Right? If I have extra energy, should I try and send it back to the electrical grid so that other people can use it, or should I just store it? Do I need to use an inverter, or can I just somehow use the power directly from the solar cell? There's so many questions. If you want light, how high should I place any of these lamps, any lamps, street lamps? If I place it very high, the lighting is uniform, but there's less of it. So where do I put it? If I have two tube lights, where do you put it is a very interesting question. The pole, what material should it be? It's got to be strong enough to take it, but light. It shouldn't fall down in the wind. It shouldn't rust in the rain. The material with the glass, there's some glass. Pros are going to sit on it. Then they're going to do their stuff. How will you keep it clean? Right? So there's so many questions, and these can be all starting points for projects. If you ask questions and do a proper investigation of this. Okay. So the main thing in a research-based project is to ask the right questions. Main thing is asking the right questions, and sometimes these questions will give you answers, but hopefully they will give you even more questions. That's the fun part. A good research-based project, your questions will not only give you answers to what you tried to first seek out, but it will also give you more questions that you can answer. The most important thing is, you do not need to make a model. There is no need of making this little farm with a little village and some animals there and third people house. Nothing. We are interested in data. What have you done? What questions have you asked? This is not an arts and craft project. You don't need a nice chart with colorful lettering and everything. What we need to see is experimental data or theoretical calculations or whatever you're doing. Keep the focus on the science, not on the beautification of the whole thing. Okay? And if you need a thermocol model, there's no point in that world. Okay? So, focus on science. Now, I'm going to take a break. The main thing is, again, where do you get questions to ask? How do you know what question to ask? That's because you observe the world around you. And the key to doing a good science project, being a good sort of thinking like a scientist, is to be very careful in making observations. Okay? And you have to go beyond the obvious. Okay? So I have 3 pictures over there. A very simple picture, just some random drawings I made. And let me ask you, what do you see? What do you think? What do you see? What do you see in those pictures? You answered a lot of questions. So let's ask somebody else. What do you see? Ma'am, what do you see over there?
I see a lecturer and knowledge level. There's a stock mark. There's a cloud.
A cloud. Excellent. Okay. Does anybody see something different? Yes. Well, let me ask him. He's put his hands up.
Hot balloon.
Hot balloons. These are all obvious things. Think. What do you see? Yes, sir.
I see a face with 2 eyes and 1 mouth.
Okay. You're seeing the whole thing together. Alright. Anyone else sees things? I can tell you, for example, if I look at the green thing, to me that can be, it could be a steering wheel, very good. It could just be a screw. I'm looking at the top of a screw. The other thing could be on top of a table. Right? So, I mean, you have to imagine. You have to imagine. It's not just hot bubbles and it's a hexagon. That's the obvious thing. What could it be? That could be a pencil I'm looking at. I'm looking at a pencil that way, right? So just let your lock your imagination out. Let your imagination sort of run, not wild, but control it. Think about all the possibilities that can be there. Italy. And Italy cut into 2 pieces on a plate. Fantastic. Fantastic. This is an Italy cut into 2 pieces on a plate. Very good. Very good. This is the kind of thing you need to look at. Okay, this is the kind of answers I was hoping for to get. Okay, good. So let's go on with some more things towards the science project. Okay, another question which comes every time is it science or is it engineering or is it technology? Don't worry. As of now, as I said, don't worry about whether it's physics or chemistry and whether it is engineering or science. Except you have to worry about a little bit about it. Why? Because at all science fairs, right from the school level over here till the international level, from the regional level to international level, science projects and engineering projects have a slightly different focus. Okay, let me explain. In a science project, it is enough to do an investigative experiment and you have data and you present that data and you try and explain it. In an engineering project, and we see lots of examples of engineering projects where people try to build something, an automatic garbage disposal robot, or a bicycle for the handicapped, or some automatic clothes folding machine. These are typical examples of engineering projects that we see. So in an engineering project, the questions that you ask and the method of evaluation is very different. There, if you have typically a prototype of something. I have made a device. I made a device which can fold clothes. Now that, if it is something that should be folding clothes, you can either do an analysis, a design, that this is how I will design it. I mean, I cannot design a spaceship that goes to Mars and show it to you over here, but I can do the engineering analysis of it properly. Okay? But if it's something like something which will take my garbage can and do something to it, or it will fold clothes, people will expect to see a working model. In this case, the model is not like a thermocol model, but a real model which will work. And it will work on the day of the fair. It is not that yesterday it was working, but today it's not working. Many times, and I have now gone to science fairs for more than 15 years, and most of the engineering models that I've seen, they were working yesterday. Okay. Unfortunately, that doesn't help very much. It's like if you build a bridge, the bridge has to survive a car going on it. If it falls, then that's no point in the bridge. So, your model has to work under, or your design has to work under real world situations. For an engineering project, there is no alternative to that. In a science project, you can say that was a bad data point, it didn't agree with whatever I was something, but in an engineering project, you have to be very careful. We'll discuss engineering projects in here. But overall, right now, don't worry about is this science or engineering, you will automatically figure out why you're doing the experiment. Okay. So now, I see two major problems, especially in Mumbai, which is people don't know what is a research-based project, that is very actually easy to make research-based projects, and, can you see? So this is one thing that what is a research-based project and how we do it. The second thing is at fairs, unfortunately, many times people do research-based projects, they go to a water-level exhibition and they won't win anything because out there they were looking for a thermocol model. So we should also tell you how we evaluate the fairs over here, and hopefully as a scientist we can help you do it. Now this, if you've come last year, you've probably seen this. All of you know how to do research. All of you were fantastic scientists once upon a time. When you were kids, you experimented and found out about the world around you. You figured out how bubbles were made, you figured out how insects were, you put them in the sand, you figured out how chapati atta is sticky or not. You did all these experiments, right? And unfortunately, what happens is when you get to class, they told you, bunk maro, don't ask too many questions, just believe this and go ahead. They didn't ask you to do experiments and actually question everything yourselves. So we have to go back to doing this. And yeah, this is what I said. People don't know about simple ideas which can be made into projects. So these are the things which I want to tell you. How do you get students to select research-based projects? How do you guide them? How do you evaluate them? And how do you help them take it to the next step? These are the questions which you should do, and you should ask me questions about all of this. So, things not to do. First, do not take a project or an experiment in your book in class and repeat it. Okay. This is how we make oxygen from, I don't know, hydrogen peroxide or something. This is how we, standard school level experiment. Doing that experiment as a science fair project, it doesn't count. So do not do a standard. Remember standard. You can change the experiment. Changing the experiment is very easy. The problem is, in most schools, the experiments that we do, you know the answer beforehand. You are expected to get that answer. If you don't get that answer, it will not work. But in science, when we do experiments, it doesn't work that way. Often we want to get some answer, but we'll end up getting some other answer. It is perfectly fine. So do not do a standard school book experiment. It's very boring anyway. Okay. So come up with an interesting experiment. And I want to show you that, okay, you can take very simple experiments and make them research-based projects. And in a research-based project, I typically do not know the answer. When I start doing the experiment, I don't know what will happen. I don't know the answer before I start out. Okay? So I have to plan out that maybe I believe this is the reason something is happening, and whether what I believe is right or wrong, I have to ask questions to find out. I have to do experiments to find out, and based on that, it will either prove or disprove whatever I started out with. And depending also, it's not that the experiment will end at this point. Once I have measured this, that's the end of my experiment. Normally, a good research-based project will be such that at the end of it, you will have something that I can take it a little further, do a little bit more work on it, to get something better. And let's take one example. I'll take a few examples. This is the first one. This is a physics experiment that maybe all of you have done in school someday. This is about a pendulum. Pendulum. String, a little weight on it, and you push the string a little bit and it oscillates, and you measure the period of oscillations and you calculate the value of G. Right? This is a standard school book experiment. Okay. Now, unfortunately, everybody knows that, well, depending on what level you are, you have to find G is equal to 10 or G is equal to 9.8 or something. If you get 8.5 or 13.6, it will be a problem. Okay. Now, how do you make this into a research-based project? Now, don't do this. This is a very simple example, but I'm using this to start off the discussion. What if I take this pendulum bob and I put the bob in a bucket of water? तो बॉब को पानी के अंदर डाला. What will happen? Aha! Now the experiment is slightly different. It's not in the book. I have to think about what will happen. So if I have to think about what will happen, I have to ask questions. So first question is, initially I had a pendulum in air and I move it a little bit. And why do you move it a little bit? Why not move it all the way up and let it go swinging wildly? Does the period depend on the amplitude? No. Then why not take it all the way up? It would be nice. Experiment will go. It will take longer for it to stop. It's unfinished within the 30-minute class. Why do people do only small oscillations and not big oscillations? So the period they said was independent of the amplitude, no?
The ball will just fall, sir, because then it's get to an extreme height, sir.
Okay, if you have that's actually correct. If you have a string, the bomb will just fall. Okay, what if you had a stick? A thin stick which will not collapse. I agree, with a string, the bomb might just fall down. But if you have a thin stick, heavy bomb, still the weight of the stick is very small. It You took it for a very large oscillations. Well, because somewhere in the middle of all this, we made an assumption which they never told you that all this is valid only for very small movements. You have to make sure that the angle you move with theta is very small so that sin theta and theta are the same. That they didn't tell you about it, but that's okay. But still, now we have put it in a bucket of water. In the period in air, in the period in water, will it be the same? No. Why? Period depends on the length of the string, nothing else. No, remember 2 pi L over G square or something. Water, air, and all doesn't come into this. Period will change? Yes. You don't tell me why. If the period will change, you don't tell me why will it change. Yes, sir.
The density of water is much more than air, so there will be a lot of friction for the bob to move.
Friction is good, so that is going to be in the second point. Will the amplitude change? You answered the second point that there is going to be friction, and the earlier it might do some 10-15 oscillations before it slows down. Here it will slow down very fast because it's in water. That's one thing. The amplitude will change and it won't be. It will damp down very quickly. But will the period change? Yes? No? No. Now you tell me why no. If it's yes, you tell me why yes. If it's no, you tell me why no.
Period depends only on the length and G.
Length and G. And G hasn't changed. And length hasn't changed. So period doesn't change. Aha. Okay. Why did it depend on G? Because G was the only force acting on the ball. But now you have buoyancy also acting on it. So now it is no longer G. There is some other force also. So it's not G. Earlier you had G. Now that G is not. Why did the G come? G was the force acting on it. It happened to be the pull of the Earth's gravity. Now it is G and there is also an upthrust on it. So there is something else happening. Okay, good. So will it depend on the amplitude of oscillation? You said yes, there's friction. So this is actually a pretty difficult problem. A damped oscillator is not a simple problem at all, and it's coming to much more practical problem. In real life, there's nothing which is frictionless and whatever. This is a real problem. If it's oil versus water, it could be very different. We have a kicking as well. You don't have to talk about it, right? So you see, just by he's gone. Just by making a small change of putting this bob in water, I can ask you so many questions. Once there are questions, then you can do an experiment. Now you can actually check the different lengths, and if water instead of oil, what are you doing? You're changing some parameters and seeing what effect it has on the period, the number of oscillations. You're changing a parameter and seeing its effect on something else. This is step one of a research project. Okay, so this is what we were doing. So you see, don't worry if you don't know the answer. Even as a teacher, if somebody comes with you, this is a project, I don't know the answer, it's alright, don't worry. The main aim is to provoke students to ask the right questions. And then figure out what can we do to answer that question. Okay, we need to figure out, is there an upthrust in the bob? Will that change the value of G? Well, let's choose density. You said water is denser. Let's put oil and water and see the difference. So you're doing experiments and figuring it out. So I will take a few more examples of this. So don't worry about that. So one standard, I'm going to think of projects which I have seen either here or at other science fairs in the past, and try and tell you how things can become good research-based projects. Okay. So again, if you've done this project and I'm picking on your project, nothing personal, I'm just trying to help improve the quality of the project. So a standard type of project is, I will add XYZ, which is a waste material, say tea leaves, to plant, and it will grow nicely. Okay? Good project, which is something which we quite often do. Okay. So let's look at the effect of adding tea leaves on the growth of plants. Now, many times this is an experiment you can do at home. But if you want to do this experiment properly, you need to do it in a manner where there is also a control experiment. That you take two plants as identical as possible. Maybe you germinate moong seeds or some simple things, mustard seeds, or something which is easy to germinate, right? Then you have at least 20-30 seeds in each category. If it's only one plant, you don't know if something happens to that one plant, So again, in science, it's good to be, you're trying to make sure that the quality of the data you have is good. So even if you're doing a simple project like the effect of tea leaves on the growth of a plant, make sure that the data you get is going to be of good quality. How do you ensure that? That you have two sets of plants. One which is getting tea leaves, one which is not getting tea leaves. Otherwise, everything else is the same. They're getting the same amount of water, the same amount of sunshine, the same, whatever it is. Then you can compare. Now then you'll say, oh, it grows well. What do you mean it grows well? What you need to tell me is, okay, I measured the shoot height every day. I measured sort of the number of leaves that were coming out every day. Maybe the size of the leaves on the average out here is 3 centimeters and there is 5 centimeters. There has to be quantifiable data. Then you can say that because of this, I feel that the tea leaves are making a difference. Okay, it is not sufficient to say, okay, I've put some tea leaves in this plant and see it's growing well. You have to compare it with another plant which started off at the same point and didn't have tea leaves. Comparing on one plant is difficult, so it's better we do it on a different, maybe seedlings of something that is sprouted, where you have a better chance that you can do 25 seedlings together and compare the two. Okay. So we've taken very simple ideas, but we've developed them into a research-based project where you are carefully varying one parameter, keeping everything else fixed, with enough data that you can take an average, you can do statistics, you can make meaningful conclusions out of it. Okay. Another very common project you see is recycled paper. Okay. People will take recycled whatever it is, newspaper, exercise book paper, some generic kachra collected somewhere, cotton husk, coconut fibers, whatever you want. You want to recycle something and make paper out of it. The most common project you will see in a school fair is people have taken coconut husk and mixed it with, I can use coconut husk along with, normally, paper you do in craft class, you soak newspaper in water and use, after 3 days you take it out and you mold it around a glass and then you can make, here's my paper glass. It's called something, I forget what it's called. Paper mache. That's not a science project. Unfortunately, what happens is, people will add coconut husk to this, right? Or shredded plastic bags or whatever it is, and say that I have done a science project where instead of using recycled paper, I can also recycle coconut husk with this, and they have made this, they have either spread it on a piece of tile or something and made some handmade paper, or they put it around a glass and made a glass. Good, very good. These things are nice. You've been able to recycle some materials. It's a useful learning experience, no doubt. Useful learning experience. Please encourage children to do these things, no problem. Can we convert this into a high quality science project? How do you do it? By making sure you try and build in effect of something on some property. For example, if I'm making recycled paper, how do you make recycled paper? You make this pulp and you either flatten it on a tile or you take a jali, the typical mesh that you use for screening besan or something. Right? You spread it on that, let the water drip out. After it dries, you can remove it. Now, what if instead of putting it on the jali, I put it on a tile which has no holes? I put it on a very coarse jali. I put it on a piece of cotton cloth, which is something like this, finer holes. I put it on a dupatta, which is like yours, very fine mesh. Now what are you doing? You are comparing the effect of mesh size on the properties of paper, of recycled paper. Now your experiment is not recycled paper. Your experiment is effect of mesh size on the properties of recycled paper. That is a much more scientific experiment than just recycling some paper and making a cup and showing it. Okay, now you've made paper, you varied something, now what do you test? There is paper. What is paper good for? Writing. So the first thing is, can I write on that paper? How smooth is it? How rough is it? Does it block my ink? Tests. Does it tear? How do you test whether it tears? Oh yeah, I can tear paper, but I can tear almost any paper. So you take again, see, you don't have to go to the national testing lab and tell me that the strength is so many kilograms per whatever centimeters square or something. You don't have to. You can measure the tensile strength of paper. That's what you're aiming at. These are school experiments. We don't expect you to go to a lab and test it. You do simple tests. Take a clip, hold up the paper. Take another clip, hold it down. Add some weights to it. Does it tear at 10 grams? Does it tear at 20 grams? After comparing papers, you have made different papers with different net sizes. One of them will tear at 15 grams, the other will tear at 30 grams, 40 grams, whatever it is. You have now got data on writing, on the strength of the paper. Does it dissolve if I put it in water? If your paper dissolved immediately, no good. Well, you can say that, oh, I made some paper plate, and at least it's okay that it will 6 hours it will dissolve. That's okay. But you're not eating your food in a plate. If you want to make paper plates, right? So somebody made a paper plate once. I'm not sure if it's this one or another plate. If it's okay for 1 hour, it's fine. Right? It's biodegradable. This is very nice because all my things in the waste products and it is biodegradable. How do you know it's biodegradable? Put it in mud. Check it after 3 days. Check it after 1 week. See how much is left. So what you will get are numbers. You will have some quantitative data. This is the biggest difference between doing a simple project, and the amount of work is not very much more. You will make 5 sheets of paper, you will color it, you will do whatever. You can add haldi and make it yellow, and you can add kumkum and make it red, and you can do all that stuff, no problem. But instead of that, if you can get it to a science level where you're varying something, look at its effect. That is really what is the key to doing good. Do you get what I'm talking about? You can take the same experiments that you were doing all these years, tweak it a little bit, take it one step higher. Okay? Okay, let's continue with some more examples. Okay. So now, let me tell you, I told you 2 examples of what are science projects. Let me tell you some examples of what are not science projects. And this probably is the most important slide, or some of them. This is really important. There are some things which just do not work as science projects. So first one I told you, repeating a standard school experiment. School book experiment. We know all the experiments and all the textbooks, don't worry. We know that this is simple. Secondly is, and this is, children are, their imagination is wild, they can come up with lots of ideas, but just making a wild hypothesis without any supporting evidence, is not acceptable. And I will tell you my favorite example of this. This is the one which I see in every science fair in some avatar or the other. Electricity from speed breakers. Okay. If I had 1 rupee for every project I have done, so electricity from speed breakers, I would have made a lot of money from it. Very popular project. Electricity from slides, somebody coming down. Okay. Nobody I have seen has actually gone and made a speed breaker and tested it and shown that you can generate a reasonable amount of electricity. Of course you can't, it's too difficult. You don't expect school children to go and construct speed breakers in the middle of the road and generate electricity. But what can you expect school students to do? Well, test if such a model is actually feasible. Okay? No speed breakers. Or electricity from somebody on a swing or on a turnstile to the park, or put rollers on a slide. Same idea. Let's take the speed breakers example. Okay. If you wanted to make a good science project, this is how you would do it. I have a road on which I will put a speed breaker. I mean, there is a speed breaker anyway. It's not that you put an extra speed breaker, there's no point because you're slowing down the car. But let's suppose instead of the normal speed breaker, you put one of these energy generating speed breakers. Typically, how does it happen? It's a roller-like arrangement or a spring-like arrangement. These are the two standard examples. Okay. If it's a roller, you know approximately in an hour or in a day, so many cars use this road. Right? So I know how many times a car will go over it. Typically, a car comes at a speed of some x, 40 kilometers an hour. The speed breaker will reduce its speed by so much, which means a car weighs 1000 kilos. I'm going to transfer some of its momentum to this. My speed breaker is going to have a mass of 100 kilos, whatever, some number. Put these values in. So it's going to rotate so many times. So that is the amount of rotational kinetic energy I have, and that is what I will convert to electricity. Step 1, let's figure out for a reasonable traffic density and a reasonable size of cars and speed at which they are coming in, how much rotational kinetic energy can I generate? Step 1. Okay, if you've come to this step itself, a lot of credit to you. Step 2 is the biggest stumbling block. You don't want to generate a flash of light every time a car goes. You have to store it. In all our electrical systems, and all of you have cell phones, what is the worst thing about your cell phone? You have to charge the battery every time. Battery technology is one of the worst developed electrical technologies. Unfortunately. Right? If you had a cell phone which you need to charge once a month, you would all be very happy. It's charged every day because battery technology is unfortunately not that highly developed. Okay? So now I have to store these energy that is being, okay, then next I have to first convert mechanical energy into electrical energy. So I need some sort of a generator. Typically it's a dynamo. People have seen a cycle dynamo, so they'll use something similar on a speed breaker also. Chalega. May not be the most efficient way to do it, let's do it that way. Let's assume it's 100% efficient. So all that energy is now become electrical energy. It's not true, but let's assume. Now you have to store that energy. What size of a battery do you need? How many watt hours of battery? Will it be a lead acid battery? Will it be a lithium ion battery? Will it be a nickel cadmium battery? What will you use? Will you charge a capacitor? Whatever it is, think about this. Finally, its cost. If the cost of that battery and your speed breaker is going to be such that the amount of electricity you get in 30 years is not going to cover that cost itself, nobody will be interested in this. Right? So, very nice ideas. I will, every time a train goes through a tunnel, there is a blast of air and I will put a wind generator over there. Good idea. You know, is it practical? These are wild hypotheses not supported by. If you make a project which says that why electricity from speed breakers is a bad idea, that actually might be a very good one. Okay. Similarly, you know, children will roll down a slide, the rolling motion can be converted to electricity. Yes, it can be converted. Now, slide, don't worry about slide. Maximum it goes up that height on the slide. You can't get more than mgh worth of energy, right? Potential energy, even if 100% becomes, you know, and the way you can extract 100% energy is to have that person at rest when it comes down. If you have any kid on a slide which is going to be so slow that you will bring him to rest, they won't go on that slide very often. People like to go whizzing down a slide. They don't like to get slowed down because they're generating electricity. That's a different issue. But the maximum amount of electricity you can get is mgh per child. And same problem. Unless you're in a place where there are a constant flow of children, you're not going to be able to generate electricity in a way that you can use immediately. You have to store it. You have to store it. You can't up in the battery. That doesn't mean don't work on such things. We've seen brilliant ideas of new designs of extracting energy from tidal motion, from extracting energy from people, you know. If you're in a mall and you have some few people walking somewhere, you can probably do something. But don't say that, you know, oh, in my school there are 1,000 children and they will walk, they go up the stairs so many times a day. And in India there must be 10,000 schools and, you know, we can generate 100 megawatts of power or something. It doesn't work. It's not that simple. Okay. So be very careful when you make. So these are again wild hypotheses without concrete. It doesn't have to be speed breakers. Last week I saw a fair, I was at a fair, where somebody had an idea, and you know in school we sharpen pencils, yeah? everybody having a sharpener, there should be only one sharpener in class. Which sharpener is put inside a bottle. So it's a bottle cap निकाल के sharpener लगाओ. So every time people sharpen pencils, we collect the shavings. Okay. And in my school, they use so many pencils every week, or I use so many pencils every week. And overall in India, if everybody did this, we could collect 100 million kilos of pencil shavings, and then do whatever. Okay. Noble thoughts, very good. In such case, my recommendation is, why don't you try it out in your class? If you can generate enough shavings to make, for example, a little board, you can just crush it and mix it with some Fevicol and put it and make a little board where you can pin up some things, maybe okay. But practically, do you always sharpen pencils in school only? You sharpen them at home sometimes, you sharpen them somewhere else. Right? Every time your pencil breaks, you have to go to school to sharpen it. I mean, you have to be practical in the ideas that you think. So wild ideas are often, they're interesting ideas. Try and channelize them to ask the right questions and see if it is a practical idea. Am I making sense? Let's continue. Writing an essay. So many of the things we get to see in science fairs are often essays. Like hydroelectric power is good. There's a model of a hydroelectric power plant, thermal model, some water flowing, a little thing flowing, and hydroelectric power is good. Okay, nothing. That's right. I mean, nothing wrong in what you have said. But these projects are very difficult. What will you vary in that model now? Right? So these are, I mean, they are no better than essays on hydroelectric power or nuclear power or whatever else. Okay. Making unsubstantiated claims that violate known laws and principles of science. So unlike electricity from speed breakers, which doesn't violate any law of science, okay, it's just impractical. There are also projects which claim that they can get free energy, perpetual motion machines. Okay, again, these are of the type that, typical example is, the fan moves around. I'll attach a dynamo to the fan, and the fan will move the dynamo and generate enough electricity to run the fan. Okay, it doesn't happen. I mean, you can't generate electricity out of nothing. The reason the fan is turning around is because you're supplying electricity to it from outside. And no energy transfer system is 100% efficient. When the car is going, you can feel a breeze. Or on a motorbike, I'll put a fan, the fan will slow you down certainly. So the energy is just going to come out of your own, the petrol that you're using to run the car. It's not going to generate extra energy. So all of these ideas will generate energy out of nothing. Similarly, the idea that you can use, gravity to do some things. You can use gravity very creatively to, take spacecraft around other planets and change their orbits and all those things. That can be done. People use it all the time. But if you have some great idea of that I can reduce the travel time from here to Mars by this thing because I will use some energy from nowhere, it doesn't work. So please respect the laws of thermodynamics. You cannot go beyond that. Machines are not 100% efficient. Nothing is 100% efficient. So, you have to work within those boundaries. Now, simple posters and models explaining principles. There is a Children's Science Congress for which this is perfectly fine. There are children's science exhibitions where they are looking for teaching models. In those fairs, it is absolutely okay to make some model that helps you understand Pythagoras' theorem better or helps you understand the laws of optics. Right? You can take a shoebox and put some smoke in it and use a laser pointer and a lens and show how the beam goes and demonstrate the laws of reflection and refraction. They are good teaching models. But at a fair like this, where we are expecting research-based projects, those won't work. They are good teaching models. There are other avenues for teaching models. There are exhibitions for teaching models. You can definitely send them there. But for this particular fair, for research-based fairs, they won't work. The last one is actually the most irritating one in the last few years because everybody has access to internet. And on the internet, there are lots of websites that give you ideas for science fair projects. Please visit these websites. Please get ideas from them. But don't just copy and paste it and not do the experiment yourself. Okay, get the idea, do the experiment yourself, that's fine. But it is just so easy to figure out that the project is copied. If I see measurements in ounces, I know that you haven't done it in India. Certainly not. Straight giveaway. Okay. I mean, people will even copy their projects, and when they print it out, they will have the HTTP whatever at the bottom of the page that they printed out. I mean, we are not that stupid that we will not pick up these things. So, please get ideas from science fair websites. I will point you to a few of them myself. Get ideas, do the experiments yourself. Don't copy everything that is there, including the table of ingredients and amounts and everything, because you have to do it over here. So, that was what was not to do. Now, how do I make projects that will actually, go to the next level and be selected, win prizes, not prizes, whatever, but the best projects. Go to the next level, maybe go to the international level. We are not expecting all of you as high school students to be doing Nobel Prize winning research. Okay? But somewhere, there has to be a little bit of what I call either innovation or novelty or creativity, that I have done something differently. I have analyzed the problem in a different manner. There's something new in it somewhere. These are the best projects. Okay? And that's one part of it. But equally important is the second part, which is a systematic and structured approach to the science problem or the engineering problem. Okay? It's not that, I made this device that will allow a person with one leg to ride a cycle. If you made that device, it's an engineering problem. How did you design it? Why did you choose this particular spring constant? Why did you make it out of steel and not aluminum? How was it attached to it? That I have a structured approach to this. Like if you are doing an experiment on the effect of the extract of some leaf on killing, termites, okay? How did you make the extract? I made it systematically. I varied the dose. I saw what was the minimum dose necessary to get an effect. I figured out whether the insects were running away or they were dying. Systematic problem solving is what is equally important. And please, before you start your project, have a logbook. The logbook is way more important than your posters and everything else. The logbook tells you and date it that today I did this, today I did nothing, that there is nothing like a rough logbook and I will copy it into fair. There should only be that rough logbook where you record what you do and you show us the original log that's okay if it has some stains on it and scribbles on it and doodles on it, that's perfectly fine. But it's very important to get into this habit of having a logbook, because finally when hopefully some of you will become scientists, when people invent things and come up with things and there is a dispute about who came up with it first, they will actually want to go back to the lab and see original logbooks to see who documented it first. Because by the time it comes out in a paper or something, it's often years later. Okay, so logbooks are very important to document everything that you do. Readings that are good, readings that are bad, everything you write down. Do not copy that into fair again. They will be, and do not try and invent the logbook on the last date by using the different colored pens and everything else. That's also very evident that this is all being written together. Okay. So keep a logbook while you are experimenting with it. And finally, when you talk to children, when you are having, we are not out there to find out what you don't know. We like to have a friendly chat with the students and find out what they did. Tell us about what they did, how they did it. When you're talking to people who've done the experiment, like they'll say, you can make out that they are into it, they have done it, they can tell you about what they have done. They are excited about it, that excitement comes out when they are explaining it. It's not something you can ask them to memorize and repeat over there. If people have done the experiment themselves and they are genuinely excited about it, that will come out when you talk to them. Because anyway, when you go to a stall, you don't expect them to start off with it's almost, I'll give you an example of how it happens, these interactions between judges, but if you've done it yourself, that comes out in the first minute itself. So what is so exciting about what I have done? So, what gets you to the international level? Actually, let me just show you if I can. Let me see if I can put it up. You will be amazed at the best projects that are done at the school level by kids in the world. I mean, some of them are at a level at which those guys, their knowledge is almost on par with, I would say, PhD students anywhere. I mean, I will just give you I will show you the winners' results from this year's fair. I mean, these are categories we don't even have in India because we don't have school students who can even do things like this. Control of induced pluripotent stem cell aging by modulation of mitochondrial DNA deletions. Right? This was a winner in microbiology, but let's not look at categories like microbiology. Let's just look at carbon microsheets as efficient electrocatalysts for energy storage, dynamic mathematics on smartphones and tablets, innovative approach to spin polarization in some compound, conjugate plasmid RK2 as delivery system for some genes, mechanical characterization of transcription factors in Arabidopsis, which is a flowering plant that is used like a fruit fly in biology, right? Fabrication and characterization of short-term and long-term memory, proton-induced thin film synaptic transistors, something in brain, right? Fabricating an artificial nose using mesoporous photonic crystals. I mean, you look at the level of these projects, right? Don't go to animal science and be too difficult. I mean, and just look how detailed the title is. An integrated software platform for intelligent autonomous control of a hyper-redundant modular robotic system using simultaneous localization and mapping. Okay? I mean, these are school kids, man. Look at the level to which they have gone. So remember that, you know, and that was the third prize, and now we're looking at fourth prize. So that wasn't even the first prize or the second prize or something. And it's not that they are all from, I mean, it's not that, look, there are projects from China and India also, okay? India is also there in that list, just remember that. It's not that we can't get to that level, we can get to that level. Okay, so I mean, just, okay, the main idea is that you can do a lot of very interesting projects. And they could be also a lot of projects nowadays are analyzing publicly available data. So there's a lot of publicly available data. For example, satellites studying the sun. All the data is publicly available. Many of these you can do modeling. You don't always have to do experiments. You can do modeling. You can take the data and model it. So, for example, sustainable future for endangered species, predicting the impacts of some policy on Bornean orangutan populations. Okay, so you have data on how animals are located, and you can then make models that if I build a road here, how will those animal distributions change? Right? These are modeling. It's not very easy to do, but it's possible. Okay, so let's get back to our thing. Anyway, from here, most of you will not be able to do biomedical engineering and genetic engineering for your projects, but there are a few projects which we see repeatedly in fairs in India which can do very well. Two such categories are what I call analyzing traditional knowledge in a modern scientific manner and locally relevant low-tech solutions, not high-tech solutions, low-tech solutions. Okay, and I will give you some examples of this. Okay, before I go there, again, this is a standard list of do's and don'ts. Things which will sort of immediately help you not qualify, things which help in your project looking like, okay, certainly not this one. First thing is, many school students, many times you are not scientific enough in measurements, okay? sorry to go back to tea leaves, but suppose you were studying the effect of tea leaves on plants, how मैंने इसमें 1 चम्मच डाला और कल 2 चम्मच डाला. Okay. I mean, 1 teaspoon is not a good scientific unit. 5 grams, 7 grams, whatever is a scientific unit. By the way, the symbol for gram is G and not GM. Right? It's G. It's not GM. There's one thing you can correct, at least the symbol for gram is G, not GM. So similarly, I mean, not being scientific is today I use 1 spoon and tomorrow I use 2 spoons, third day I put 1 spoon. I mean, you have to be consistent in what you're doing. Significant digits. This is another very common pitfall. Everybody has a calculator these days, and if you do, and you know, after telling you all this, that you have to repeat your experiments and take averages and everything. Yes, I will do 5 experiments and take the average, and the average will be like 21.6666666667. And that's what your calculator tells you, so you write the whole thing over there. Those digits are not significant. Just because your calculator tells you it's 1.1428571, it doesn't mean you write the whole set of numbers there. Round it off to whatever is reasonable. Don't believe all those digits your calculator gives you. Okay. Now, the third example is a little bit more difficult. This is in making sure your statistics are good. Okay. Now, imagine that you're all good scientists, so you've done 5 readings of each. Let's say you're experimenting comparing 3 kinds of soap. Okay? I'm comparing 3 brands of detergent and I want to figure out which one is the best. And I do some experiment where I figure out how much oil can they neutralize. Okay? And the A, B and C, this is the amount of oil that they are neutralizing in milliliters. One of them is 183.5. One of them is 183.6 and the third one is 120.5. Okay, 3 numbers. I've done 5 experiments, right? And every time I put some oil, I measure oil to the nearest milliliter. I measure 100 milliliter oil, 200 milliliter oil, see how much oil is neutralized, and I do the thing 5 times, I take the average, and these are my results. From this, what can you say? Which is the best? A, B or C? Remember, what we are looking for is the highest. Okay? The highest amount of oil which can be neutralized is the best detergent. A is 183.5, B is 183.6, C is 120.5. Which is the best? B. Unfortunately not. The answer in this case is I can't tell you. It could be A or B. Remember, how did I get 183.5 and 183.6? I had 5 readings. Maybe they were 182, 187, 183, 184. Average came to 183.5. Your least count in your measurement when you did the experiment was 1 milliliter. The other one also you did something and it came to 183.6. You can definitely say that A and B are better than C. But to say that B is better than A, you don't have enough data to say that. Okay, you can say that, well, A and B are both looking good, we can't figure out which one of these 2 is the best, and that is often what happens. Often in science, you do not have enough accuracy in your experiment to be able to distinguish between 2 things. You can definitely say A and B are better than C. The difference is about 60, which is much more than your least count, which was a milliliter. Okay, so being able to draw the right kind of statistical analysis and do the right kind of statistical analysis and draw conclusions is very important. So please, teachers, please help your students. This is not a very obvious fact. It's very easy to fall into the trap that, okay, I've done this and B must be the best because it's giving me the highest number. But please be very careful. Okay. 4th thing, internet science. Internet science is, well, why did you think this? Well, I saw it on the net, and if I saw it on the net, it must be correct. Well, not everything on the net is correct. Okay. If you are reading a scientific journal, if you are reading, where do you read on the net? I saw it on the net as a meaningless statement. You have to tell me that this particular website on the net says that this leaf is a good antibacterial agent or something. But just to say I saw it on the net is not good enough. Please make sure that you are referencing reliable websites for one, and also preferably, you can, nowadays a lot of scientific literature is publicly available online. You can look at it, that it's reliable, whatever you're saying, because there is a lot of garbage on the internet. And not necessarily it's true. I mean, there are also experiments that will tell you that, oh, if you mix, what is the one, hydrogen peroxide and something glows. Mountain Dew, a very common one, Mountain Dew and hydrogen peroxide, I think, it will glow. Nothing of that happens. Okay? So there is a lot of hoaxes around on the net. So be very careful when you say that, oh, I saw it in the net. Then finally, the tendency to use black boxes. This is not the black box of an aircraft, but a black box in the sense that you don't know what is inside it. So many times, and this happens increasingly frequently now since many schools and labs have high-tech equipment. If you are using an equipment to do something, you better well know what does that equipment do and how does it work. We were compared to check for adulteration and everything else, and then they had this funky device, I forget its name, a lactometer, that's what it's called, and they said, oh, we use the lactometer and these are the numbers given by the lactometer. What are those numbers? What does it measure? No idea, that's what the lactometer tells us, this number, so this must be good. Oh well, is it measuring the electrical conductivity of milk? Is it measuring the weight of milk? Is it measuring the amount of bacteria in milk? Or is it measuring the density of milk? Right? That's the density of milk. At least know what the instrument does. And if you are doing projects that involve electronics, if you have an electronic circuit, you better well have a circuit diagram. Circuits without circuit diagrams, there is no point building a circuit if you do not understand what a transistor does, what a capacitor does, what a resistor does. And you can go to Lamington Road and buy enough kits. There are kits available to do anything. You will make it. But if you don't understand what your kit does, if you are making robots, it's very fashionable to make robots these days. Robots that do various things. And in fact, you also have Lego NXT controllers, you have Arduino controllers, you have Raspberry Pi, you have so many nice devices available. Please use them. You're not saying don't use them. Use them and do great stuff with them. But understand what you're doing. Understand how are you programming it. What does it do? If you give it a command, what happens? What is it controlling? How is that motor being controlled? Don't get a kit, build something and do not understand what it does. That is, guarantee recipe for disaster. If you use electronics and if you use programmable things, please understand those programs, please understand the electronics. Otherwise, it's not necessary. After this slide and then we'll take a break. Okay? Alright. So, the other thing is, please use all the resources that you have. Remember that anybody can be your guide. Your guide need not be just a school science teacher. If you know somebody who is experienced in this, please go and take help from them. If you've done something where there is a potential, you want to figure out if it's antibacterial or not, and you have somebody in your family who can access a lab somewhere where they can measure it, go ahead, do it. There's nothing stopping you from working in a lab somewhere else. Anybody can be a guide. Maintain that logbook. A record of the thought process is a must. That is absolutely important. If you start off with something, often what will happen is, I believe that this is what should happen, this is why I'm doing it, and then you find out it doesn't happen. Don't throw that away. Sometimes by starting off with an experiment and showing that, well, unfortunately it didn't happen, we were trying to make your project work, but suppose your project on magnetic, I was trying to magnetize, put something in oil which would be magnetic and I would recover it. If at the end of the day you found, no, it's not a very efficient way of recovering it, fine. It's still a good science. The science is good. You worked on making a magnetic fluid, you tried to find a use for it, that's okay. Experiment is still good. Control experiments. Control experiments are a must, especially in biology. In biology, you absolutely have to have a control experiment. If you have made an extract of XYZ plant and you're going to spray it and tell me that machhar will die, you better, if that extract was made in methanol, you better spray methanol as well. Because for all you know, it was just the methanol that was killing them and not the extract of your plant. Right? Similarly, even if the extract is made in water, spray water, you will find at a sufficient dose range, you will down those things and they will die. Okay, so control experiments. That's sort of the negative control where I don't have the active material which was there. But the other kind of control experiment is, I have made this wonderful thing, it drives away mosquitoes. Right? Please compare it with an all-out or a Baygon or something that is a standard pesticide available. It doesn't have to be better than that, but at least is it similar? Right? I have made this controls the growth of bacteria. I've tested in a petri dish that I grew these colonies of bacteria and I put a drop of my plant extract and there was an exclusion zone of so many millimeters. That much area got cleared out of the thing. Well, compare it with some standard antibiotic that is used. It may not be as good or better, but at least as a comparison, we know that okay, if you know, whatever neomycin gave you so many things and this is half as good as that. Oh, good. Control experiments are a must. Appropriate measurements, a very standard category of solar cells and all kind of electrical measurements is where people measure voltage and no current. People will do experiments in electricity, solar cell generation, hydroelectric power generation, wind power generation, all these things. I can generate 5 volts, I can generate 7 volts. Meaningless. I can generate 10,000 volts by rubbing my leg on this type, static electricity. Is there any useful current? No. So you have to measure voltage and current simultaneously. If you have 2 multimeters, very good. At least, if not, use it 1 multimeter, measure voltage and then measure the current. But then, voltage into current is what gives you power. And it's alright. It's okay if you generated a milliwatt of power from your cell. But at least show me that you generated a milliwatt and not just 5 volts. Measure the current as well. And then finally, you have to repeat experiments. You have to make sure they are practical. We'll discuss some examples of this. And limitations of your data. And the limitations of data was an example of that soap that I showed you, 183.5 or 183. Sometimes your data is such that you cannot distinguish between two things. So you cannot make a conclusion that this is better than that. Recognize this. Recognize that these are what my experiment allows me to do. Beyond this, I cannot say anything. Okay. So my suggestion is, let's take a short break over here and I'll come back and we'll continue with this. Okay, I will show you some examples and I will also show you some tips about what you can do.